but we'll see. We are recording live on YouTube. So everybody who's here, welcome. I am so glad to see you guys in person.
Yes.
Most of you only see me monthly on Zoom.
Right.
And that Zoom camera gets my best side. For those of you on YouTube, the generous camera on YouTube, just so you know, it always adds 10 pounds. So you will be seeing 10 pounds extra of me, so maybe I won't stand up later on, we'll see. But welcome to Merrick Library. For those of you who are new to the library, welcome. We're happy to have you. Viewers, we're welcoming you also. And my book club people, look at all of you, those faces. Oh my gosh, it's so great to see everybody in person. Well, how lucky are we to be having our special guest tonight, Annabelle Gurwitch, the author of You're Leaving When. This is a paperback book stop for her, Merrick Library, and I am thrilled to host you.
Well, it's, so exciting, first of all, to be here in person, but, just to actually be anywhere at all these days is really exciting. I just feel like I'm here, still here. We're all still here for those of us who are still here. I mean, it's been such a profound time. And, it's always wonderful when Carol Ann reached out to me to meet someone who's read my books, multiple books. I mean, the compact that we make as writers, the dream is to have people follow you from book to book, and so it's super exciting to meet a devoted reader. But I just want to say one thing in particular about this book that always, it strikes me when I see the cover, because, when we think about how quickly norms can change, when we picked out this cover, when the artwork was shown to me, I thought, oh my gosh, that's perfect. Nothing says downward mobility more than a couch, when furniture in the lawn, right? And then the pandemic hits. Who could have predicted this? And nothing says, oh, I'm so lucky to have a space outside, than a couch in the yard. So, these even over time, over short amounts of time, things can change. And to me, that is, an unexpected, great little thing about this cover, because this book is about change, and it is about adaptability. And I didn't, of course, we didn't anticipate the pandemic, and so I didn't anticipate how much of a value adaptability, adapting to new normals would be. One thing I say when I think about this word adaptability, as opposed to something I write about in the book, resilience. In particular, I feel like women, as women, and I am writing from a female point of view, women are often put in what I call resilience prison. Like, we're told, you gotta be resilient and get back up, and there are changes that we go through in life where resilience doesn't cut it. It's adapting to new normals. And one of the things I write about in the book is I'm writing about the aftermath of life when you're no longer the daughter of or the child of, when your parents are gone and you realize that suddenly you are your family elder. And so these kinds of things, these are immutable changes. And so that's, I just launched in there, Carol.
Yeah, that's fine. You can go. We're good, we're all ears.
But that is one of the topics of the book, and I'm so grateful. As you said you laughed out loud, because, when you face these things, sometimes humor is the only thing that we can have.
The very first chapter of your book is, I thought there'd be coasting. And you know what? I think that every day. I really thought I'd be coasting, right? You think, and then maybe you think you're coasting for maybe 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour. And then I read the next sentence, which is, it was the worst of times, it was the worst of times. And I'm getting ahead of myself, but one of the things we talked about earlier today was that, and I think Irene is here, Irene Schechter is here, she had come up to me about a week ago, and she said, I read this book, and I felt like Annabelle Gurwitch was talking to me. You have a way of writing, and your tone of writing that is so approachable, and get it, we understand it, even if it's not exactly that specific situation, we know something like that. I don't know how you get that on the page. Is that something, when you're successful, when you've gotten it down, you say, oh, I really nailed that part of it. Like, how does that, when does that come to you?
Oh, well, first of all, that's yay. I mean, that is my goal, is this particular style of personal essay, and I want you to feel like I'm talking to you, and if you feel like I'm actually mean that to hear people say that's writing for me, that is my goal, because as I said this before, you know, I don't feel like I'm anything or anyone extraordinary. In fact, and I think that's a good thing. I think what I feel great, one of the great things about not becoming very wealthy is that I feel my issues and the things that I face are very relatable. You know? I mean, I feel like the things that happen in my life are happening to so many people that is where I reach the threshold of the difference between things I write in my journal that I do not publish and things that I'm interested in publishing. You know, I'm interested in things that when they happen to me, when I feel like this is something that's happening in the world that other people will relate to. And in fact, this line, I thought there'd be coasting, was actually said to me by Marissa Tomei. we were at a lunch, and we were talking, and this was about 5 years ago. We were talking about how our lives had not unfolded the way we had expected, and the messages we had gotten in the media and the various entertainments, and absolutely, I mean, first of all, I'm writing from a certain amount of privilege. I mean, a day doesn't go by, particularly it's been made poignant by the pandemic and the events in the world. I feel so fortunate to be wearing shoes, clothes, have shelter. I mean, these cannot take these things for granted. So, you know, that being said, there are so many people, and Marissa and I were reflecting on this, we're working numerous jobs. We are working harder. We know that there's the very wealthy and the very poor, and the middle has fallen out. Many of us who are in that middle are just sort of like, what exactly happened here? The idea, so many things have changed. We no longer work a job, get the gold watch, and retire. I mean, most people, I call us the never-retirement generation. We're actually not allowed to be tired. Thank God we have good coffee in this country now everywhere. On every corner, an espresso. A chicken in every pot, an espresso on every corner. But you know, our whole norms have changed. And we were talking about how, or having children or not having children, or our children have changed genders, or we've been through marriages and divorce. Just things did not unfold in a way that we thought from women's magazines, from various Nancy Meyers movies, and so then what? There's no coasting. And that realization, as we sipped more coffee, was something I thought about for quite a while, and every year I would email Marissa and I would say, still no coasting, how about you? Still working like 4 jobs, how about you? And we would just laugh about this, and finally, 2 years ago I said, you know, I'm writing a book about the no coasting. And so, but that idea, she planted this idea in my mind of a framework to look at life now. And one of the things we were just talking about was the messages, like where did I get this idea that there'd be coasting? So if you've read the book, you know that I write about, well, where did this idea come from? And one of those things is the oeuvre of Nancy Meyers films.
Which I have to say, so I would sit with my sister and we would talk about all those Nancy Meyers movies, As Good as It Gets.
Yes.
You've all seen it. It's with Jack Nicholson.
Oh, is that Something's Gotta
Oh,
Give?
Something's Gotta Give. Sorry,
Yes.
Something's Gotta Give. And every time I watch that movie, I want to destroy my living room.
Yeah.
I want to take the sofa out. I want to go to Home Goods and buy 16 new pillows, which you mentioned. And so when I read that chapter, I thought, again, this is me. I want this. I think I should be coasting. I think, okay, my kids are off, they're in college, they're out, now they're living some, but no, then something happens the next day, and you're waiting for that to happen. And I look at movies like that, and I remember watching that. Every time I watch it, I think, what does she do for a living again?
Well,
Why do I have that job?
Like in that particular chapter, which is like in the middle of the book, there's, you know, I'm taking you through a story, but that chapter is really
my copy with my sticky notes, because there's tons and tons
I have
of
taken
notes.
a picture of that. That's the author's dream. But that particular chapter is really the background chapter of where I think I had this mistaken idea that there might be coasting. You know, in that movie, does anyone remember that movie, Something's Gotta Give? Besides Carol Ann, not right. Diane Keaton. She lives in this beautiful home that happens to be on the beach in the Hamptons. There's not a soul on this beach, and the couches are so overstuffed. What's inside? Maybe money. We don't know. She's the most successful playwright ever, and she has a pied-à-terre in New York that she's redecorating. Oh, but she's alone in her large kitchen. But not to worry. Spotless kitchen. The backsplash. Humans have never entered this kitchen.
What does she make from scratch? She makes waffles and pancakes.
She makes pancakes. How does she do it? She can cook. She can blow dry her hair like nobody's business. Her wardrobe is all cashmere and goat skin. I don't know. And then, but not one, but two suitors, Jack Nicholson and Keanu Reeves. Yeah. That happened to me last week. I mean, where in this world does this happen? Oh, who's she gonna choose? Hottie, young Keanu Reeves, or old crotchety, but he's still got it, Jack Nicholson. I mean, it's so, and Keanu Reeves is a doctor. It's hilarious.
A doctor who looks like Keanu Reeves. I mean, you know, and he's going to take you to these beautiful places, and he kisses your hand when you open the door.
And he's Keanu Reeves. And he wants her, who is 60, which is what I am. No, this does not happen in life. But you know, these movies, and you know, so I write about these entertainments and how somehow that planted an idea of this aspiration. This was, okay, well, somehow or another, this is what I get to, because I remember when I saw that movie, I was younger, I had more earning years ahead of me, and I don't know, I just kind of thought, well, that's how it would be. I just did not have a picture. Of course, I think entertainment is starting to catch up with us, but this does talk to the idea of what is it that we want from entertainment. Do we, and I think what I am trying to do is give voice to, as I like that phrase, of the things we don't normally say out loud. Because I feel like that's something that my mother was not able to do. And in particular, I wanted to include this idea of writing about financial insecurity in midlife, because, and what is midlife? I don't know, anywhere from 30 till death. I don't like, you know, what is, who knows? I don't even know ages anymore. But I wanted to write about that because I saw in my own family background that separated my mother and her friends, and that generation. And even growing up, we were never supposed to talk about that or acknowledge that. And I felt like, you know, this is, can we get past this? Is there, I want to talk about this. And Carol Ann, you and I were just speaking about this. It was difficult for publishers a couple years ago to want, they were like, we really like the funny stories in this book, but you know, this women want aspirational reads. We don't want to read about financial insecurity. And I could have published in a different way with a larger press. I went to a smaller press than I've normally worked with. But I was really intent. I really felt strongly I wanted to do this book, and it has been very satisfying to, I get, you know, when people contact me and they say, oh my gosh, you're writing for me, I really relate to this. I had this happen after my divorce, or when my children came home and are living with me, which over 50% of young Americans are living with their families again. I mean, this, it's a little dance break. It's a dance break. Okay. So, this is so, it was it's been so satisfying to have people appreciate this, and particularly satisfying also was that Tara Parker Poe in the New York Times added my book to her favorite books for healthy living. And I really appreciated that because it was the only book that talked about finances and their effect on your life. And I think it has a really big effect on your life and your happiness. And that made me so happy to be read in that way. Because someone said, is this a self-help book? I said, well, it's kind of a self-hurt book. I'm not saying don't do what I've done, but don't be a freelancer your whole life. But I do feel that you can face with humor because sometimes that is the only coping mechanism that exists, the things that happen. And it is a book, I feel, is also a book about saying yes. Now, when I say saying yes to things that happen in life, I don't mean like yes with an exclamation point. I go kicking and screaming to yes. But the stories in the book about home sharing and opening my home to, I really thought that was going to kill me. I mean,
it's tough stuff to read. Are you still in touch with the Frenchman?
Oh, the Frenchman. Oh God. Well, okay.
And does he still have the bathroom?
Oh, it was a thigh too far. That bathroom. But the thing was I, in this moment of change, when I was, approaching the empty nest. Of course, that's so hilariously to me now, because then my nest really never emptied, because not only did my child come back home to live with me after college, but I started renting out this guest bedroom. And now the chapter about the French tenant, that's included. Jean-Luc. That is included just for humor. That just went wrong in every way possible. But yes, every so often I hear from Jean-Luc, and I know, I don't think he knows I wrote about him. Names have been changed, but I could not make up. And there's some things you can never unsee. I can never unsee that tiny terry cloth bathrobe.
That is one of the funniest scenes. I was reading that to my husband. He's like, "Why are you reading that scene to me?" He's like, "Why is that so funny?" Because just imagine this. I don't want to imagine Jean-Luc in a small bathroom.
No, that was terrifying. But and there were so many stories I couldn't include. There was this one story I could not include about Jean-Luc. So if you haven't read that chapter yet, just think about this and add it to your imagination. I mean, and I sort of rail against how we are constantly being sold new agey woo-woo stuff, and
where's the jasper stone?
Jasper crystals and
red jasper stone.
Yes, all these kinds of things, and how also we know in stressful times people buy these things because you just feel like you need something, right? But I did have a friend of mine over who was doing like a New Year's solstice meditation. And in this meditation, so I can sit with that because there was no charge. But so it was like 30 of us in my living room meditating, and we were supposed to think about picturing ourselves somewhere we wanted to see ourselves in the new year. And then we went around the room, and we're going to say where we were. Well, and I have like a little scented candle, sort of like lavender scent, whatever, as we're meditating. Well, as I'm doing that, this is like, 9 o'clock at night on a Saturday night. Jean-Luc is in my kitchen frying salmon. Now, the whole house smells like salmon. And when we stop meditating, everybody opens their eyes and says, I picture myself by a body of water. I'm by the it's been inspired by the scent of fish. It's my fault that this has happened, you know. But so that didn't. I had too many. He was just so came with so many stories. But the other stories, you know, I mean, the thing was, I thought that experience was going to destroy me. I thought, oh, who am I now? Am I a landlady in, you know, lousy house dress, 1940s slippers? Mrs. Roper, Mrs. Roper, you know. But what it did was, it became, you know, I said yes to it because the other choice was, when I did the math, leaving my home, and I didn't want to leave the home. And so opening my home ended up sort of filling that love, that motherhood love space. And, you know, I found this other iteration of motherhood to the many students who've come and lived in my home. And then when the couple experiencing homelessness came, I mean, that was transformational for me to have to face the otherisms that I didn't know that I had internalized about who was housing insecure in this country. And it profoundly changed the way I saw the world. And that was so unexpected. And I am still in touch with Kiana. I'm not in touch with her boyfriend. They have since broken up. They are 22. It didn't happen. But Kiana is doing great. You know, she signed with a music label.
She did? Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
She's living she's renting a house with a pool and a tennis court. she's making more money than me. And, you know, and it's really interesting because, you know, I've had this debate with people. I had this discussion with Bill Maher. This did not, if you look at the appearance on the show that I did with him, this particular angle of our discussion did not make it on the show. But one thing we talked about was, you know, Bill challenged me as he does, and he said, well, isn't you're telling this story, aren't you tacitly supporting the idea of people coming to LA to try to be in the arts who can't afford it? I said, well, first of all, they had saved money to move to Los Angeles. They had lost it through a series of scams, and then the housing got expensive, and they had been robbed, and, you know, this was never a plan of theirs. But I said, you know, what's really interesting is, before this happened, I would have said that too. It challenged my idea, because I said, you know, when you think about it, if we say we can't encourage artists to come and pursue a career in the arts, then who do we want to create music for us? Only the children of wealthy people or people in the industry who already live here? Don't we want to hear from voices like Kiana Nicole, giving her a little plug, because she is from a small town in America that's been decimated by fracking, that culture has disappeared in, that services do not exist in, that there is no future for her in. And isn't she just like my immigrant family who moved to larger cities looking for work? I mean, you know, it was, oh, okay, that's interesting. You know, and that's something I hadn't thought of when I think about, again, who is housing insecure and who gets the privilege of being in the arts, you know. And it's interesting because, you know, I'm not her mother. She has a mother. That was one of those surprising things for me that happened. Was the first thing that happened when they came into my house was they both called their mothers, and the idea that someone who had been living in a car had a parent who cared about them and they were in touch with, it never occurred to me. I mean, it just did not. I thought this was an entirely disenfranchised group of people. And
that chapter, when you write about that, and that scene particularly when they call their parents, it was not something I was expecting. Right, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is the last thing I would, the way the chapter unfolds, the way that whole part of the book unfolds, their story, you would not think that that would be something that would happen.
Well, you know, this is one of the ways that saying a begrudging yes to an experience that I thought was going to kill me really improved my life by opening my eyes to how small-minded I thought I was incredibly open-minded. I thought I knew so much and, you know, more to learn, but, you know, we are still in touch, and it is an interesting role, and it is a role that people played for me when I was starting out as an actress in New York. I had people who were a little bit ahead of me, a little older than me, who were kind to me, invited me to holidays and these things, and I do that now for Kiana, and I always say I'm not her mother, but I am a mother, and I am a mother in her life. And we just talked the other day, something happened at the house she was renting, and she wanted some advice, and you know, it's I feel so profoundly fortunate that even with, of course, we all have our own issues, that I get to be someone who can still be a sounding board for her. I don't like to say a mentor. I'm not trying to learn from her. How are you doing what you're doing? I mean, it's
well, and the bravery she gives such bravery.
She's
every
a
single
tenacious
day.
person.
And
yes,
when you look at that and you think to yourself, I wouldn't have been able to do that at her age. And like, you don't want to say kids today, but kids, you know, there's just a different sense of that's not control. What's the word I want to use? Of bravery. I keep going back to that, but they have a lot of control. They have a lot of chutzpah. They have a lot of drive to do that. And I don't know that I would be able to do that.
I know. I mean, I think it's an incredibly challenging time. I mean, every era has its challenges, and this one is certainly.
This one seems extraordinary, and I think the only reason I think that is because I'm living through it.
Yes,
Right,
I'm
so
living
ego,
through it too.
right.
You know, and this is one of the things I write about in the book is about my own child. Again, when you face these sort of immutable things where resilience no longer works, but adaptability. So what does that mean in the chapter where my child, who is now 24, and this is one issue, there is no good word for an adult child who identifies as non-binary gender. We need language for that, you know, because adult child doesn't, as I write in the book, you know, I have to say, like, the young person whose phone bill I am still paying for. What is the right way, because it's not a son nor a daughter, and I wanted to write about this experience because this is something I didn't have the resilience muscle for. Now I'm not the mother of a son or a daughter, I'm the mother of a non-binary person. That required more imagination and adaptability than I had in my toolbox, and I had to learn about it. And you know, it's actually, and it's funny because I wasn't sure that story fit into my book. And so in my own mind, and you know, you can let me know whether you think this is successful or not, I said, okay, so downward mobility also can refer to emotional roller coaster. There's a little bit of a fudge, because I meant mostly financial downward mobility, but I said, okay, that's what it means. And so I added that into my equation, because in each of the books I write, which are all essay collections, you know, they have to answer to the title. They have to answer to a theme, because they're all connected by the theme as sort of in the premise of my titles. I love a title. My book, You Say Tomato, I Say Shut Up, about marriage. I mean, you know, there's a lot of things fall into the You Say Tomato, I Say Shut Up in marriage. But that chapter, it's interesting. Of all the events I do, there's always several people who want to talk about what is that, you know, how the adjustment goes, because so many of us have, particularly in younger generations, children, nieces, nephews, friends, and children who are going beyond the binary in terms of gender. And just yesterday, I was doing an event with a group of readers in Pennsylvania, and a very lovely woman who was maybe in her 80s said, well, how does your child dress now? And I said, well, last time I saw Ezra and their partner Taylor, who both identify as non-binary, they were wearing matching prairie dresses. Now, I object to the prairie dress. I am against prairie dresses. They're just a little
like the gunny sacks kind of dress, remember the gunny sacks?
Yes, the gunny sack dresses. I'm like, can't we get past the gunny sack dress? But the truth is, they look cute now. One had a black one on, one had a white one on. I'm like, if you can make the gunny sack dress work, more power to you, Ezra. I'm not doing that. I am not getting back in the prairie dress.
You mentioned Bill Maher earlier. I know that I saw something over the summer maybe, or recently, that HBO would be maybe adapting Your Leading Way.
Yes, I've been working on that script, and now I have this lovely actress, I can say, Lisa Edelstein, who was in the Kaminsky Method.
I know who that is.
Girls Got Divorce attached to it, and you know, these things take either, they happen instantly or they take a little while, so fingers crossed.
And how are they how do you write for that? It's a series, right? So
yes, the story from the book that I'm adapting is the story of the Annabelle character, of me taking in a woman who is in her own crisis, taking in a couple experiencing homelessness to help pay for her bills, but they don't realize she's having her own crisis. So it's these two, just like that chapter in the book. So that's the landscape of that show.
That's amazing.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers. So when you do are you doing the actual screenwriting?
Yes. I've been doing that with all of my books. I've been writing them with for various networks, and just hoping one of them gets made.
Well, Fired, the documentary, was one of my favorites. I mean,
thank you.
that, and if you haven't seen Fired, it's from 2003 or 4 or something.
No, let's see, I think it's 2007
Okay,
or 8. Yeah,
it's on Amazon. All I know is it's streaming on Amazon, and it's about, well, I'll let you say what it's about, but funniest stories that you interview people from all your walks of life. Like, so your gynecologist is on there, right?
Yeah, I have my rabbi, a gynecologist, former Labor Secretary Robert Reich, economist Ben Stein, people I met on an assembly line in Lansing, Michigan. It's people and comedians. And Bob Odenkirk from Better Call Saul, and Jeff Garland, and Sarah Silverman. What happened was, when I was hired and then fired by Woody Allen in a play in New York before everyone hated Woody Allen, I knew after that experience, I mean, I was devastated as you are being fired, but I knew that it was a story that I wanted to tell, not because I wanted to tell my own story, but I knew it was a good opening to hear other people's stories, because I felt so crappy afterwards, after a certain amount of ice cream and drinking and a meeting in my garden. I thought, I just feel so alone in this being fired and experience. I need to hear from other people of, did it ruin their life, or how did they cope? So I started,
how did they come back from it?
How they come back from it, and how it changed their life and maybe set them in a different direction. So I started asking comedians for their stories. Comedians like, at the time, Paul Feig, who created Freaks and Geeks and directed Bridesmaids, was a comedian, and I asked, Jeff Garland.
Jeff Garland's story is so funny, and the way you sort of put him, you sprinkle him in throughout the,
and Ann Mira, and just all kinds of, and so I asked comedians and people in show business who are experts. We get fired so much, but then I thought, well, let's take it out to the larger world, and so I started investigating stories in the news, and I wound up meeting Robert Reich, the former Labor Secretary, and I wound up in Lansing, Michigan, and so there's stories from all across the economic spectrum about that experience, and that actually turned into my first book, which I edited, which is a collection of stories about being fired and the transformational experience of being fired. And that's when I really got this idea. I had been a commentator on NPR, and I've been mostly working as an actress, so I hosted Dinner and Movie on TBS. That was one of my jobs, my long-time jobs.
Again, another show my sister and I would watch, and oh my gosh, it was just great. It was just great.
Well, that was my first real comedy job. I had trained as a Shakespearean actress, and I only thought I would do tragedies. I never thought of myself as funny back in those days as an actress. And I wound up in comedy, but after I published that Fired book, this idea of taking things that happen in our life and chronicling life, I mean, we all as writers follow in Nora Ephron's footsteps. I think she set the bar high for that. But, you know, chronicling life and writing to those things that I felt subjects that people didn't want to talk about. So that's always been what I feel like my sweet spot is, or what I'm interested in. So in the book before this, which is Wherever You Go, There They Are, stories about my family you might relate to.
It's great.
Thank you. Those are stories about families, chosen families, and our blood relations, and how those evolve, and even when we try to seek out new groups to serve as families, they don't always turn out to be exactly the way you think they might be.
And what's the quote it's right at the beginning, I don't know if it's the introduction, you talk about when people say, oh my gosh, come in, we're going to
Yes.
treat you like family.
I always say, like, why do you want to be treated like family? What we really want to say is, come over, we'll treat you like cherished friends we never have a chance to see. You know?
Something about a hostage crisis, like it's a hostage situation.
Very often a hostage
Because
situation
right.
is a family situation, you know. So I'm always trying to challenge those ideas, and that is the point in this book, is to say, what are our expectations of the life we'll be leading, and what is the reality, and how do we deal with that? And one of the chapters is about family, though. It is about realizing as the older generations pass, and you realize that you are one of your family elders. And what does that mean? What kind of responsibility does that confer upon a person? And how will I attain that? And, you know, I think as a younger person, I know that, you know, it's such a funny thing, the way that I looked at we had a lot of very formidable great aunts in my family. And they seemed, of course, the hilarious thing now is I realize I'm older than some of them lived to be. You know, your idea of age is so different as a young person, and then suddenly realizing I'm this person, and that the younger people in the family will look to me as either like, I hope I'm never doing that. You know,
or no, Aunt Annabelle's coming over.
Yes, or as that's, this is sort of becomes, you know, what we look towards as God forbid, role models, or not. And what does that mean? So every chapter is a reflection on a different way that one finds oneself, confronting expectations and realities at a certain point in life.
And the other thing that Annabelle does is she co-hosts this tremendously, it's such a great podcast. It's 15 minutes. It's with Laura House as the co-host. And it's called
Tiny Victories. And like what we say on this show, first of all, it's a tiny podcast. I have a very short attention span. So I wanted a podcast for people with short attention spans like me. So it's 15 minutes long. And what Laura House and I do, Laura is a comedian and meditation teacher, which is a fantastic combination. I tell you, I love Laura, and we often disagree on things, which is a great, to me, that's so much fun to talk to each other. So what we say we do on the show is we celebrate minor accomplishments and fleeting joys. We like to try and see if we can cultivate, what we say is cultivating an appreciation for small mercies. Things no one is ever going to take out a front page article, and no one's ever going to congratulate you on a tiny victory. And so we talk about things we notice in the world, in our own lives, in the world, and then I have this idea that just seemed really far out to me, that we would put out a tiny victory hotline. And we list the number, it's actually 323-385-1675, and but you can find it online. And we ask people to call in with their tiny victories, and people call in.
They call in, and the stories that you hear are so amazing and kind, and you you appreciate the tiny victories. And in the time that I've been listening to the podcast, which I think started in 2020.
It did, started in the
During
pandemic.
COVID.
Yes.
And I remember it has shaped sort of I make a green light. I'm like, victory, you know.
Well,
So, especially if you're on Merrick Road, and people who know Merrick Road know if you make that light, you're set.
It came to us to start this podcast at a time when it seemed like large, triumphant moments in life were not going to be had at that moment, were on hold. So how could I get through the day? How could we get through the day? By just finding something small, a small mercy to hold on to. And so the things people call about range from things like, someone will call and say, I managed to order my medication before I ran out. I've never done that.
And she was so nice because I think her name was Ellen, and she said something, because I listened. She said something about how nice the customer service person was, and she was surprised. And then I think Laura said something like, well, they're customer service, but you don't always get that. When you call those prescription
And
hotlines.
when that happens, it's like, oh my God, and you just to take that moment to appreciate that, I think that is something that is, if there's any gift of the pandemic, it is what is one thing of realizing something small has great value. And then last week, and I know you said you heard this episode, we received a call from a woman in Tbilisi, Georgia, the country, not the state, and she talked about she had just taken her mother to, I think it was Istanbul, to have some surgery, the health, and this B&B she had rented for her mother and sister to stay in while her mother had this surgery. She couldn't get the electronics to work, couldn't get this television, and she wanted them to have this little small pleasure. And finally she got it to work, and she was so thrilled that she wasn't defeated by technology. Defeated by technology? This happens to me every day. So, I don't know how to work my own television anymore. I just give it up. It's still, because once I went off the cable or the streaming, and it's just like, oh, I can't do it.
The universal remote is not such a great
It's
thing.
just not working anymore. And so, and she said, I listened to the show, and Laura and I both were crying because we thought, okay, the idea that you could be in the country of Georgia and be trying to do this small act of kindness for your mother in this large, horrible event, war happening, and to remember to have a tiny victory, well, that was just so incredibly satisfying.
It was just, so the whole, but it's not, every story is so different, and it's just that you can relate to that yourself in some way. Well, you know what, I did that. And sometimes I'll text my son with the TV. Guess what I did? I got the Disney Plus tour. Because I gotta watch Disney Plus because I'm a Marvel person. But those are like the things that you take for granted. And listening to this woman overseas trying to give comfort to her mom was really it's just a beautiful thing.
Well, it was a totally unexpected thing to even start that podcast, but it does sort of affirm a value that I also am really interested in writing about, and that's small details. And when you said, it sounds like you're talking to me, that is my goal in writing, and I hope that I achieve that through observation of small details. That's
I can make sticky. Each thing, and I just think I'm gonna underline. I'm like, no, I'll just put a note on the sticky so I know what page it's on, because that's just how I roll. I know we're running out of time, and I do also want to mention that you are a spokesperson for the Lung Cancer Foundation of America. Mm-hmm. Beautiful thing. You have 30 years in the entertainment industry. That is no small feat. That is no tiny victory, let me tell you. Crazy. Also, I remember when you were Agent Ross on Dexter. Because I'm a Dexter person.
Gosh, I so wanted Dexter to kill me. It's a really strange thing, like as an actor, the things you do. When I was on Boston Legal and Candace Bergen called me a skinny bitch. I can retire now. I've been called skinny and a bitch on television.
Like Candace Bergen.
And it was very fun reunion because Candace and I had worked together on Murphy Brown. I had played one of her secretaries that she had fired, and so now I got to play someone to go toe to toe with her. It's just, you know, I had a very fun career as an actress.
And in your movie, there's a movie this week that opens with you in it. Did you meet Jake Gyllenhaal?
I did not meet Jake Gyllenhaal. I came out of retirement to do this movie, Ambulance, this Michael Bay movie. They had called me about that, because writing took over my life. But as I think I said in one of my books, you know, one of the things I miss about acting is getting a knock on my door. Excuse me, Miss Gurwitch, do you have time to try on a cute skirt? There will never be time in my life that I don't have time to try on a cute skirt. Yes, I miss the craft, but I really miss people bringing me clothing. But that does not happen as a writer. So when they called about this movie, Ambulance, starring Jake Gyllenhaal, I got very excited, Jake Gyllenhaal. I did not meet Jake Gyllenhaal, but I play a therapist to an FBI, because I was like, I do not think of you, Annabelle Gurwitch, in a Michael Bay action film. But I play a therapist to an FBI agent, and it was really fun, and it was actually right in the middle of a terrible lockdown in Los Angeles.
And the second one that came through that.
Yes,
second wave,
it was
yeah.
just unbelievable, and it was really scary, but they did a great job of COVID safety, and it was really
And
fun
I
to
didn't
do.
see the movie yet, so I'm assuming there's no explosions during your therapy session.
I don't know, Michael Bay.
Right.
He likes to add explosions
He said
inexplicably. Who knows? I haven't seen it yet.
I was thinking, I don't know if I want to see it, because if something happens to you, would that be good? We're gonna have a little problem.
I have no idea.
I'm gonna open this up for questions.
Yes.
If anybody has any comments, please feel free, raise your hand, go ahead, Gail.
When you write about Ezra and the problems with school, the one thing that hit me was, where's his father? I know you got divorced, but he just left you to deal with all of this?
Well, my ex-husband and I, as I say, you say tomato, I say shut up, was a book we wrote together. At some point there was not enough tomato and too much shut up. But we had just split up when I was writing this book, and I didn't want this to be a divorce book. So I really don't write about my ex-husband in this book, because I just was not, I think to write about something I have to have detachment, and I just didn't have enough detachment. But as one can imagine, and I think happens very often in marriage, people polarize, parents polarize. So I felt that the most attractive and way for me to write about the issues of motherhood and my own desire to help my child in my own journey. I hate the word journey, but it is often a journey. It's like the word chapter. When everyone says, oh, this chapter of life, I want to punch them. Really? I'm in a chapter. This is one of these personal growth situations. Don't say that, or I'll have to dexter you. I just felt that it would be a better position to me to write from, to just write my own point of view on that, because I just did not feel prepared. So I just tried to, as much as possible, leave my ex-husband out of the book. It was just too close. But I did want to write about, again, I write about being another experience of motherhood that is transformational, that I think so many of us go through, which is I'm the mother of someone actually who is 5 years in recovery as a sober person. And I don't think if Ezra weren't in that position, I probably would have written about it. But to write about the emotional experience and also the kinds of decision making of that experience, I felt was such a roller coaster that I wanted to affirm that for other parents. I felt I hadn't seen enough writing on that subject, you know, and of course, one of the reasons I haven't seen enough nonfiction writing, I want to say, on the subject is it's hard. When my child was younger, when Ezra was younger, and I've written about Ezra, well, they were a kid. So I always think about, well, when they're older, if, you know, what they will think of what I'm writing. But now, in particular, if I'm going to include them, and, you know, I'm not writing their experience, I'm writing my own experience. And that is a story that first appeared in the New York Times about when we did the zombie escape room together. And, you know, I do clear things with them. There are things I don't write about because they are a young person and their own person. But I just didn't feel comfortable writing about things that touched upon my ex-husband's, you know, perspective. And so I hope no one had noticed that, Gail.
Also, I just have to, there's a lot in your book that I don't relate to because my life has been so different. But I loved your book, and I have a granddaughter who is now a grandson. So I appreciated what you wrote about that because, and when you say small victories, every time I say he instead of she, it's like I did it. Because for 16 years, this was she, and now it's he. And it's very hard, you know?
Yes.
And I'll never stop loving my grandson.
Right.
I adore him, and he wants to be a screenwriter.
Oh, wow.
He's going to college next year, and he got accepted at a couple of good programs, so hasn't decided yet where. But
That's great. That is so great. And it is a tiny victory. I mean, this is the thing. As we know, Gail, we do not get a New York Times story saying, congratulations, Gail, you said he.
right.
But in a way, why not?
And also
You know,
the fact
it's
that
a
you're,
big achievement.
and the fact that you're acknowledging yourself is
Yes.
really important, right? That's
Yes.
like it's that self-awareness is so important instead of beating yourself up over it. To say, oh gosh, I got it right, I did it. You know, it makes you feel even better.
Gail, I hope you'll call the Tiny Victory Hotline.
Oh,
May
you
I give
should.
you the number? No, I really do.
I'm gonna write it down.
Now I'm gonna get it wrong. It's either 285-1675 or 385. I say it all the time on the show. It's on our website.
And I'll send the link out in
Thank
the
you.
newsletter
Thank
to
you.
everybody. We have time for maybe one more or two more questions or comments. Anybody have anything? Just nothing? Good, because I have some of my own.
Oh, wait.
Okay.
The recurrence of gratitude that you express in the book, because so many of us, you know, you lose focus when you're a parent and you're working and you're doing it, and those small gratitude times add up and you become a better person for yourself and for others.
I know, and I hate that. Like, I hate when people tell me to do a gratitude practice. I'm like, do you hate me? Do you want to punish me? Like, telling me that? I've heard that. It doesn't. But it's true that, you know, appreciation of every, as I say, you know, tiny victory and small mercy. It is, and I think that, again, this is one of these things that tough times do for us, and this book was written in the aftermath of divorce, loss of parents, kid in bottoming out with drugs and alcohol. There were quite a few things. Although I just want to say, of all those things happening, the thing that hit me the hardest, that really sparked writing this book, was when I was fired by my tennis teacher. Because that was unexpected. You know, all these other life passages, I mean, okay, I knew how to grieve that. When Stacy Cohen said I was no longer welcome in the cardio tennis class, the group class, I thought, how terrible a person, a tennis player. Yes, I was weeping through class. I was going to work. Yes, I forgot my shoes, my tennis racket. There was a lot of cursing. I was a wreck. But, you know, it's $15 a class. There's like 10 people in the class. Really? You know, that just was like a low blow for me. That just kind of hit me. And also, I was playing tennis with mothers that it was my last connection to this peer group of mothers that I had met for raising my kid. And so when I lost that, and because I lived in a different area of town, really, and it wasn't like we were best friends, but it was our sort of connection. We had done that after dropping off kids. It really said to me, okay, the change in this time in your life is complete. But it was really funny that was it's always like the straw that breaks you, and I was like, I'm banned from life, from the Van Nuys, public, not even a private club. Oh my God, I got kicked out of a public tennis court.
So you were reliving your fire days.
Yes, yes,
They terminated the first time. If we have, I got 2 minutes.
Ask this, but when your friends were asking, have you dated yet?
Well,
I'm not sure I'm allowed to ask it.
you're going to have to read the book. Because there's a chapter about my gentleman caller that is in the book, and that will answer that question for you. It took me a while. It took me a while after the marriage. I needed some time and some distance.
I wasn't sure how much was true in the book. Was it all true?
As my sister says, none of it is true, especially the stuff about her. It's all true. You can't make these things up. I mean, the ridiculousness of things that sort of happened in my life. When I lost my parents, my mother died the morning of my father's memorial. And we suddenly had a double memorial. I mean, it was, my sister and I were still like in shock from that from years ago. It was so crazy. But this is what happens in life when you think, oh my God, the things that happened to me, if I saw it in a movie, people wouldn't say it was real, but that is what life really is about. And I guess this is why I write nonfiction, because I'm very ordinary, and all those very ordinary, extraordinary things happen to me.
And to all of us, right? I feel like there's
To all
something,
of us,
it's just,
yes.
that's what makes this relatable, all the books relatable, the Fire documentary, the Tiny Victories podcast, all relatable. I cannot thank you enough for taking the time, making this Merritt Library a stop on the paperback book tour.
It's so exciting.
I'm so thrilled that you came.
I'm so happy to be here, and I'm just so touched that you all came out tonight. I know we're all getting used to leaving our homes again. So it's a big deal. It's a tiny victory to get out of the house.
That's exactly. Here, tiny victory. And thanks to all of you on YouTube. I hope you had a good time. Thanks to everybody who was here. Thank you, Annabelle. Round of applause.